Water makes this place a home, shows the land what it used to be. Flat as the darkening of moonlight, in silty syllables slipping to the sea. Water hitches a ride on this land, a constant shifting, returning. A lazy watercourse, pumped out to sea, shows the land what it used to be.
The river has not been there forever. It is a product of the last ice age. It's been around probably for the last 8,000 years. So it's been around the time that we have been settling Somerset. And of course Somerset comes from Somerseter, the land of the summer people, which was largely about how the Somerset Levels and moors were farmed in years gone by.
I've been doing it for 65 years, the mud-horse fishing at Stolford. It's been well known and a lot of families did it. And of course, my son, he still does it, but we're the only family left doing it. And it's very old and it gets in your blood and it's a job to stop it. And I'm well over 80 and I'm still doing it now. I will remember the very first time I went out. My father said, "Come on then, boy," and put me in the basket. I was only about 3 years old, and he put me in the basket on my shoulder, and we'd go down to the beach and onto the mud-horse, and he'd put the basket on the mud-horse, and I'd be sitting in the front. And of course, he'd go out and do the shrimps and all that, take maybe 2 hours, and I couldn't get off the sled because I was too young. And I well remember a great big conch slithering across the mud like that, and my father running after it. And I was so frightened. I thought he's going to run again, and he's not coming back. And that sticks in my mind from a little 3-year-old. Well, it's a constant thing that you don't know from one day to the next what you're going to catch. There's always something different. Sometimes you go out and get nothing. Only a lot of broken up nets when we've had a lot of very heavy gales and the sea been swelling high, and you really have to work hard with the seaweed and probably get nothing out of it. Well, on a very good day, we catch a variety of almost every fish you can think of. Skate, Dover sole, plaice, eels. But of course, the main thing is shrimps. Always has been the brown shrimp of Bridgewater Bay. And of course, where the shrimp is, all the other big fish, one follow the other to have a cheap meal. And in the winter, we catch a lot of cod, white bait. We get a bit of all sorts. Funny thing really is in a thunderstorm in the middle of the night and the thunder and lightning come and waves of eels coming down and going across the mud is very scary and frightening. Eels all curling up and rolling along down to the sea. Now, you know, it's incredible really. The ordinary person wouldn't, you'd think it was fantasy. Like the eel population coming out from the reservoirs and rains, and they work their way down to the sea and they Once they get to the sea, they're there for maybe 2 months, up and down, acclimatizing to the salt water, because since babies they've never had salt water, so they have to acclimatize to all the salt water, and then when they're ready, slither off down to into the Atlantic and go 3,000 miles to the deepest part of the ocean and lay their eggs, never to come back again, only their babies, which is little glass eels. And they take 2 years to get here, come all the way up on the current and come up to the River Parrett, under the Parrett Bridge and up to Severn, and that's where your elver catchers is there scooping them out.
We get on board the ship, and we're primarily there to provide safe passage and advice up the river. We are providing local knowledge about where the river banks have got to, what the weather's like, if we feel that it's safe to come up. When it comes to winter and stuff, it can get foggy and they don't want to go up an narrow river where they can't see the edges. It can be always interesting, and it's never the same twice. It's a very much a cooperative kind of relationship with the captain, because they're relying on us to safely help them up the river, and the river makes you think, always makes you think, every time. It's an awkward, cussed river sometimes. Today when we came up the river, as you come up towards cottages, you normally slow down so that when you're coming to the exciting part at Nine Streams where it's a 90-degree turn, you've got 3 or 4 knots of current up your backside, and so that can make the movement and actually moving the ship quite awkward, and it can push you into the banks and it can push you away from the banks, and it's not a lot of space up there. So yeah, this morning it was chuffing along because it's nice high spring tides, so we whistled in and got sort of a bit hooked around the corner quite rapidly. Coming towards the berth, we had to put on some sternway just so that we were not coming in too fast. Part of being a pilot is that we need to provide accurate and good information about the state of the river. To know where the riverbank or the bottom of the river, the mud banks have gone in the river, and we have to walk along the banks to see where the mud has gone. So we do that usually a couple of days or a day before the vessel comes in. We know where it is, so we know if there are any issues where we've put the space to get out of it. It's a lovely way of finding out about the river and being part of it, because it does have its seasonal moments, and you get the herons standing on the bank and the colours changing. You know, you get the mist, and it's a beautiful river to navigate. It's a difficult river to navigate, but it's a very pretty river. It can be very dark and dank at night with all the lighting and stuff. It can be very blacker than a dog's guts, is what we say sometimes. it focuses the mind when you're going up the river like that. So yeah, it's a good river. Difficult river, but it's a good river. It is like the lifeblood of any place because it forms and it shapes the landscape and the rivers and the people around it. It brings good stuff in, it takes good stuff out, brings bad stuff in, can bring bad stuff out, but it's almost like a living thing. It creates its own environment around it, and we adapt around it. It's not necessarily the other way around. Nature will always get the better of you. The river will always have the last word. River Parrett is my little bit of water, my little bit of river.
Here you are, where salt meets fresh. Small fry navigate brackish currents. Here you are, where birds nest and feed. Plover, pipit, peregrine, egret, avocet, heron. Here you are, where skylark and swallow swoop. Crows crash upon a kestrel mid-hover. A murmuration of starlings returns to roost.
My name is Alice Laver, and I'm lucky enough to be the site manager at Steart Marshes, which is a nature reserve right on the Steart Peninsula in Somerset, where the River Parrett meets the Severn Estuary. My favourite thing about my job is seeing the changes that you make. You're working with nature, and because I'm right at the beginning of a habitat creation scheme, a brand new nature reserve, it's seeing it develop through the seasons year after year. It's very exciting and very rewarding, and the people I work with as well who help make that happen. I've been based at Steart for 3 years now, started in 2013. It was a very, very different reserve when I first started. It was all high-vis, flashing lights, so a lot of the big equipment on site. So it was a construction site. There was none of the water had been brought into the channels, so it was looking quite barren, and it wasn't green. There was a lot of brown, a lot of the seed hadn't come, so it was almost desert-like. So very, very different picture. And the breach hadn't even been done, which is this 200-metre gap that we've dug out of the old Parrett banks. That also hadn't been done, so it was very, very different dynamics, but very exciting. Steart Marshes is primarily it's a habitat creation scheme, so we're in partnership with the Environment Agency. It's all connected with climate change, rising sea levels and habitat that's being lost. We're 460 hectares in site, and we've got 3 different main areas. We've got a freshwater area, we've got an area that's open to the tide at all times, and then we've got a regulated tidal exchange area, which is still tidal, but we have a structure so we can control it more. It's a very, very different angle for the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. We normally have our centres, people need to pay to get in, we have captive birds, we don't have any of that. So WWT have taken on Steart Marshes to use it as a demonstration site to show people the value of wetlands. So it's the first of our working wetlands. And a working wetland, quite simply, is showing people what value there is in a wetland. So there's carbon storage, there's the fisheries side of things, there's eels, the farmers who graze, so they get prime value for their salt marsh beef and lamb, all of those sorts of things. And we've also got a lot of research going on the reserve with different universities and the local college to try and provide evidence for these services, because that's really important for conservation going forward. People can get involved with the work we do here at Steart Marshes in a whole array of ways. There's simply just visiting the site, seeing what we're doing, and a lot of people, especially the local community, have really taken on ownership, which is fantastic. We also get a lot of people volunteering, so we've got nearly 40 volunteers. We've had over 10 kilometres of new footpaths, surface footpaths put down, which is suitable for wheelchair users, bicycles, simply on foot, and also bridleways as well. We've got 4 new hides, which we've got that quite near the main car park that people can use, and these offer the most fantastic views all around Somerset.
No carrots. You sit here, you just sit out there. It's really hard to see. Is it the grey one? So you can do that one. No carrots. Yeah, but that's fake, isn't it?
And how are we doing for charcoal? Has anyone used theirs up yet?
So the most exciting time for Steart, really, in terms of wildlife and bird life, is the winter. So it's really important for wintering waders and birds. They come here and they feed and roost, and we get these fantastic clouds of thousands upon thousands of waders coming up and doing these fantastic displays. The summer is a bit quieter, but you have got the sound of the skylark, which is almost the sound of Steart in the spring, and then you've got your dragonflies and things coming in. So depending on the seasons, there's always something to see.
The first boat I made was a rather primitive canoe towards the end and after the war, and materials for building anything were in very short supply. But we built a canoe using fir poles sliced down into semicircles, and we couldn't get canvas, but we managed to get some old coal sacks which were very closely woven and sewed them together, and we clad the framework of this rather crude canoe with the coal sacks and tarred it with 6 penn'orth of tar from the old gasworks at Tangier at Taunton. Of course, a big influence on my sporting activities was really being in hospital when I contracted polio in 1945. I spent about a year at the Children's Orthopaedic Hospital at Bath, and eventually I was discharged with a caliper to support my leg. But I found I could ride a bicycle. I knew I could still swim, so I cycled a lot and I swam a lot. Other sports I didn't have much to do with for obvious reasons, but I developed canoeing and fishing and cycling. When I was younger, I secretly cherished an ambition to be a boat builder, but this was never to be. For some reason I went into clerical work. When I'd got to Bridgewater and started work there and settled down at Combwich, I decided the time had come to build a seagoing vessel, and I bought the plans from a magazine called the Yachting Monthly, and I started building this in about 1972, from the plans, from the keel up. It took me about 4 years to build. The Shiny was constructed out of 1/2-inch best quality marine plywood on an oak frame. It's 26 foot long, 8 foot beam and 3 foot draft, and had 4 berths and a 10 horsepower diesel engine. It proved actually to be a very seaworthy craft. One year we tried to sail to the Azores. We got about halfway when the weather turned against us. Black oily clouds looming up from the west. We had experience of 3 real gales. The worst one was just on the edge of the continental shelf off the Bay of Biscay, and the boat was going up and down, and she'd rise up on the wave and come down for a fraction of a second. You'd actually lose weight, and when it stopped falling, you'd hear all the crocks crash back down into their shells. Nothing concentrates the mind more than being out to sea on the Atlantic with only half an inch of plywood between you and 3 miles of deep water somewhere above the Bismarck. You remember every nail, every bolt, every screw, every piece of wood you put into the boat. Did I do that properly? Because you only need one thing to fail. Because if one thing fails, something else starts to fail. Then the whole thing becomes a shambles, falls to pieces. Fortunately, this never happened to us. We had a great voyage. We turned tail and ran downwind, and in 2.5 days reached La Corunna, northwest Spain. The River Parrett. I love the River Parrett because of its great variety and its extreme tidal regime. So like what Oscar Wilde said in one of his poems or writings about the chap in prison. One of his mates in the prison couldn't see anything out the window, but he could see stars. And this is what I see about the River Parrett. I see all its advantages and all its beauty when the tide is out and when the tide is in.
Masts lined up, cranes and chains, slog and toil and work, Dockland working round the clock, clay cut and shaped in strike, in hunger, dug from the riverbank, coal-fired in the fug, double Roman roof tiles, 20-holers, ornamental gable ends, left to cool in updraft kilns, shipped out to the world, upstream, downstream. Commercial yards sprung up, Crowpill, Hamp, Friern Street, Dampit Street, Chilton Trinity. Industry fuels the town. Ships, cranes, chains, dockers.
I started in 1960 on the old Bridgewater Docks, and a normal day you'd start, say, 8 o'clock in the morning, and as soon as the boat finished you'd be down there with the pay packets. You could pay there every boat. There used to be steam cranes in Bridgewater. There was 2 there, right? And one was a small one, but they had this big wide one, right? That's the main one that we used to use. And then whatever docker come in first, you used to have to fill up his bucket for it, and he'd be up there with a white pulley block, pulling up buckets of coal, so he'd have enough coal out there to keep the crane going all day. Being a docker, you was more or less your own boss. If you didn't do the work, you didn't get the money, as simple as that. And you had something different more or less every day, wouldn't he? Like, you know what I mean? That's what I used to like about it. But it was all on price, see, so you used to get good money, don't get me wrong. But it was hard work. You had to put up with it.
I started work in Bridgewater Docks in about 1965. The first ship I ever worked was a Dutch coaster carrying Star fertilizer for Bridgewater warehousing. I started 7 o'clock in the morning, I turned up. There was 4 of us down the hold. We had to put all the underweight bags into slings, just a ton in each sling, sent out so the checker knew what was going on each lorry. The first day, we took about 300 tons out of the ship. The second day, we finished it off the other 250 tons. But I was very, very tired for several days after that. I was at Bridgewater Docks for 2 or 3 years. When it closed down, I shifted to Dumble Wharf when my father worked. The first ships we had in there at the time was coal boats. As well as the coal boats, we had ships from all over the continent. We had ships from Sweden with timber, Russia with timber and peat, salt from Germany, fertilizer from Germany, and Poland, cement We had a lot of big ships from Ireland loaded with beet and tin milk from Nestles. We had a complete cargo of ammunition and rifles. So it was over 1,000 ton we had down there in store for years. Well, when I started at Dunbow, there was about 30 men. I worked for the company full time, so I didn't have to stand in the queue. But the chaps used to turn up every morning to see if there was work on the ships. And if there wasn't, they come back next day and try it again. When we finished up, I was discharging ships by myself with the grab and the other stuff. There was no men needed, only one man, Rex, who was driving a bobcat. I only seen him in the afternoon, later afternoon, and for about an hour I dropped him down the hole, he cleaned the hold up, I lifted the bobcat out and the ship was finished because it was box hold. The vessels we started with back in the olden days, like the 60s and 70s, was vessels of about 500-600 tons. When the Germans and the Dutch started building the big Rhine boats, oh, you're looking at ships about the 2,500 ton, and of course they wanted them done between the tides in the morning and the night, so you couldn't stop, you had to keep going all day to finish the ships. I was working the ship one night late, and it was quite dark. It was in the winter, it was freezing cold, and I had to finish this boat off because we had another one to work next day. And the crew off the ship decided they was going to Bridgewater for an evening, and they had an evening when they came back. They were quite drunk, and one of them got rather close to the back of the crane as I was swinging out of the ship and hit him over the side of the quay, and he went down between the quay and the ship. How he wasn't killed, I don't know, but he landed in the mud down the bottom. They had a job to get him. One of them slipped down the side, and they got a rope around him and pulled him back up onto the quay. He told the boy to stand still, and he put the hose pipe over the top of him. In the frosty night, it was freezing, and he washed him all off, managed to get him back on board, and he told him to go to bed. But next morning, he was up letting the ropes go on the boat. He was a very lucky person. I don't know how he got away with it. The ship's captains and the mates from all over the world, they came. Very good friends to me, and I was working the ships for all the years, 40 odd years, and I met a lot of them, the Germans, Dutch, the Russians, very good friends, and I miss them all.
Stripped back, steamed, weaved into being, buff and brown and green, bundles of willow.
think the River Parrett's special in many different ways. It seems to have its own character, and we do ask a lot of it. It drains a large part of Somerset. It has to take that water out through what essentially is a bowl, the Somerset Levels, and out to sea, the Severn Estuary, Bristol Channel, which has the second highest tidal range in the world. And the tidal influence on the Parrett is huge. And the tide goes inland 12 miles. So essentially we've got a long extension of Somerset coast, which comes all the way inland to Oath Lock, which is the tidal limit. It comes off the high ground. It follows the shape, so it will follow the bottom of valleys with all its tributaries. Then it comes down into the low-lying area. Now you have to bear in mind that some of the areas it drains through around Langport, down to Borough Bridge, in that area, that land is below the level of a high tide.
Water makes this place a home. Each turn a reen or sodden patch of sedge and rush, withies stuck up like witches' fingers. Water hitches a ride on this land, the bore swelling, testing teasels. Reeds sway like an audience to the moving mass.
Under the bank of the Parrett you have an old medieval core, all hand-dug, handmade over many, many years, that has just gradually been built up and stoned in some places, and now you've got trench sheets, dams against parts of it. But the origins of it goes back to the 12th, 13th, 14th century. So to be able to farm that area, you had to have a greater degree of control. So they embanked the river. And South Lamewall, down below Borough Mum, they were growing peas and beans out there in medieval times. So I think they recognised that winter would always be wet out there. But summer they saw the value of the land, and they saw the opportunity to improve the value of the land, particularly for grazing. They also recognised that it had a value in irrigating the land. So instead of putting up fences across wet land, they used wet fences. So that those ditches then water the cattle, and they provide some barriers for the cattle so they don't move between the fields. But they also help to drain the land. So you've got a whole mix out there of drainage, irrigation, drainage, irrigation. And the complexity of trying to do those two things in a low area below the level of the high tide has taken centuries, generations and generations of owners and farmers to get it working. And it literally works within a couple of inches.
Now the mucky end of the year, as above, so below, leaves and soil and wood gone soft. red gaping mouths of pipes to draw and drain. Built to stop the floods again. The pumped outgoing tide, a constant shifting, returning. Saltmoor, Northmoor, Burbridge Strait, West Sedgemoor, Westonzoyland, dredging upstream, dredging downstream, out to sea, out to sea.
Historically, the theory of flood management was to increase capacity within streams, to use concrete and hard engineering to straighten and widen channels to make the capacity of the rivers larger so that areas wouldn't flood so easily. There's been a shift in thinking where we're working with natural processes to enhance those. Natural flood management aims to slow the flow using structures within small streams, such as woody debris dams, which are leaky structures that trap twigs and leaves, which hold back water and disperse the water onto the floodplain, which then slows the flow. There are other methods which encourage attenuation of water, so it might be you might build a pond or a small bund out of soil which would intercept water that's flowing over the land, and then we can just hold it back on the land and let that water sink into the soil, and then it takes longer to get into the streams. FWAG's all about protecting the natural environment and working with farmers to help them improve the environment for ecology or resource protection. On the Hills to Levels project, we're focusing on the resource protection side of things, looking at water quality, reducing flooding and the condition of the soils to not just improve productivity for the farmers but also to improve the infiltration of water into the soil, where the soil can act like a sponge rather than a sloping roof.
That's it, time, lovely.
Is it working, yeah?
Yeah, it's already working. Look at the colour of the water there.
Oh, yeah.
Middle one.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're going to have to...
Tap it. Trust me, tap it.
Oh, yeah, we've up the top we're going, mate. Yeah.
Oh, right there.
Just before, you see the two big aspen trees?
Yeah.
Growing right next to the water. We're going just the other side of them, so.
All right.
Just the other side of them.
Within the small streams that lead into the River Tone and the River Parrett, we've put in over 100 woody dams, which are slowing the flow and helping hold back water when the river levels rise. We've also got plans to put in other features, including ponds and areas of floodplain storage and other things similar to leaky dams that go in ditches just to hold back the water to reduce flooding in particular areas that flood frequently. These might be roads or people's houses, and we're planning to do this over the next 20 years because we're delivering the 20-year flood action plan in Somerset.
Good question. Yeah, I mean, we've been doing some envisioning, and the word we came up with.
The thing that I'm most passionate about is soils and looking after them. It's a non-renewable resource. It takes about 800 years for 1 centimetre of soil to develop in the UK. That can easily be washed away within one heavy rainfall event. So if we can manage them correctly, then that would be the best thing, in my opinion.
Water seeps into our thoughts. Work days stretched out like sailcloth. From South Petherton to Martock on a push bike, flax from the mill glimpsed in a kingfisher's plumage. Remember those days. Remember those stories. Remember those ships made ready with ropes laid flat. Take a slow walk on the rope walk. Listen as the memory of the river echoes like a bell.
Carey's Mill is the mill in the middle of a Victorian industrial estate, originally known as the Parrett Works. It was established, I think, about 1854. It's been used for crushing apples for cider. It was a snuff mill, so grinding tobacco. It was mainly used for rope and hemp, parachute cord for the war. There was flax grown all around this area, and the flax was actually used to make sailcloth and canvas here at the mill, amongst other things. And that was quite a seasonal operation. The Parrett Ironworks also used to make industrial machinery, quite pioneering stuff back in 1850. They made turbines. They did lots of industrial machines. They apparently used to make a traction engine every year, once a year. And so it was a hive of activity with lots of different things going on. And of course a major employer as well. Apparently there were several hundred people employed here in its heyday. The bell would ring to gather all the workers in first thing in the morning. The water wheel would start up, and everybody would have piled in from South Petherton and Martock on their push bikes, and obviously they'd all do a full working day, and then to signal the end of the day the bell would ring again, and off they'd all go back to the villages, and the water wheel would go quiet. A mill of this size with all those different operations obviously took a lot of powering, and there were 2 water wheels on site, one here in the mill and another at the back of the site in one of the other buildings. But latterly there was a steam engine used to supplement the water power, and that's the reason why we've got this amazing Campanile 70-foot high chimney. There were 5 working mills on the River Parrett, with Carey's Mill being one of them, and Carey's Mill was the last one to close in the late 1950s. I believe it was derelict for quite some time, and it was bought in the mid-70s by a chap called Nick Sloane, who is a renowned stonemason, letter cutter, printer, a real craftsman. And he lived here for over 20 years, and he basically saved the building. So when Nick came to sell the mill, he was really pleased to be able to hand it on to someone like Keith, who has always been somebody who makes things, recycles things. The mill is a very creative place, and Keith suits that because he can turn his hand to anything. So the mill enables him to make lots of things, sculptures and arty things. He mends things for all sorts of people. He designs things, very bespoke engineering type jobs he's able to do here. And it really suits the character of the building. Keith has carried on in that tradition of Victorian engineering. So it's still a working building, but it's adapted to the modern day. My wish for Carey's Mill is that it is able to continue to be a working building and to be at the centre of a beautiful industrial estate, and that the site is restored a little bit so that it becomes so that some of the ruined buildings are restored and resurrected.
So we're here in Parrett Works, which is right on the boundary between South Petherton and Martock, and the river flows between the 2 parishes, 2 villages. My name's Martha Baker, and about 20 years ago we bought the warehouses here at Parrett Works. About 7 years ago we had the opportunity to buy the rope walk at the back with 2 other partners, and we've slowly been working on what we can do with her, because she's rather a large area and she needs a lot of TLC. So the rope walk was originally built to hang out ropes. I mean, she's 300 foot long, and they used to hang the ropes out for the tall ships. All those beautiful large sailing ships, you couldn't allow the ropes to get kinky, so they used to have to be absolutely straight, so they'd hang them out to dry. And that's the reason why she's so long and so straight and so empty. She was just full of ropes. The Parrett literally flows just over behind the rope walk, and it is a slight floodplain, so those floods would have made the fields around here really rich and fertile. The flax would have grown in quite a few of the fields for the rope that they made, for the canvas, for the sails, for twine. There was all sorts of stuff being made. So the land around here was very important. So as well as the industry here, lots of farms would have been growing the flax so that they could make all the ropes. And that was all down to the river. They wouldn't be here without the river. For a long time the rope walk has been just left, and she's looking very sorry for herself now. But she's lovely, and she needs to be full of industry, she needs to be full of life, and she's just waiting for us to find her niche again and find her market. And so the idea is that we're going to bring back light industry to here. We're going to have smaller units inside her that can then have all sorts of different industries. Nothing pretty, we're not talking about pretty, we're still talking about industry. We know in this area there's a very high proportion of self-employed people, and many of them are still working out of their gardens, they're working in their office, their shed in the backyard, and it's just not big enough. They want to grow that business, they want to be able to employ 1, 2, 3 people, and they just can't do that. And that's really what we're after, being able to produce a site that they can grow into. So it's very important for the community, it's very important for the employability aspect, because there's always too many people not with jobs, and especially the youngsters. And as an ex-local teacher, I'm very aware of how many of our youngsters don't get jobs around here, or at least don't get the jobs that they'd like to get. My wish for the rope walk: to be full of people again, to be full of life, to be full of people bimbling around, doing their thing, living their lives, making their businesses grow, and just to be a hub of activity again, for the water to be flowing through the Leat, for us to be making electricity from that water, and everyone enjoying the electricity and knowing that we're all part of a little industrial community keeping the rope walk alive.
My ambition is to restore boating in the River Parrett once more, as since the 1880s it has been resting. I believe that around that time you could get a £10 ticket to America from Langport. In those times there would have been queues of horses and carts all the way down Bow Street waiting to unload barges coming up from Bridgewater, with huge trade, salt I believe from Cheshire, and bricks to the Bradford's yard down at Long Load. The piece of water that we are hoping to use is down to Oath Lock, and then about 6.5 miles up to Thorney Mill, which at present is a little narrow and a little inaccessible, but subject to working out how to turn the boat. We will be hopefully delivering passengers from Langport to the Scythe Fair next year up at Thorney Lakes. So the Duchess of Cocklemore, my boat, 1908, the ex-Teignmouth to Sholden ferry, will be promoting our lovely waterways, enhancing and creating a lot of enjoyment for everyone who might like to travel on her. At present she's a 3-cylinder diesel engine, which at times will be needed, I believe, because the Parrett does have a wicked sense of humour, and sometimes it misbehaves, which is part of the fun of it. It's not a boring river, it's a lovely river. The choice of this boat was a strange one. It's a passion for something beautiful, something unique, something that possibly no one else would bother with. It could be a fiberglass catamaran or solar powered, overfunded thing. That's not the point. This has got an agricultural feel. It's a gift to the river. It's similar to perhaps the last craft that might have travelled up the river. I'm working with the Langport River Group to reopen the slipway at Black Bridge. We're hoping to put pontoons at Cocklemore and various other locations along the river for use of boats and also fishermen. What would the river like of us? And if we start there and we respect nature and the river, I think it will feed us. The most important thing is to work with the river and nature. A river can drown you, a river can feed you. It has a magical spirit to it, and it's a gift to the river, and let's hope the river appreciates us and the boat.
I think my wish would be to have, amongst all those who are associated, live by, work with, affected by the Parrett, whether they all had a common desire to see it in good heart and really valuing it as a river that does so many things for us. It provides us with so many different services that, you know, we still need to look after it. The knowledge required to make sure it works well in summer as a farming land compared with winter is absolutely vital and is handed down from one person to the next person. And I think that knowledge brings an intimacy between the people who live and work out there and the river itself. Having that affection for the river and the health of the river because it affects our health. I think it would be lovely if we could all come together and say, that's what it does for us, that's the good it brings me. If we could find a way of doing that, I think it would really take us on into the future and keep that affection for the river alive.
Tiny murmurs, a trickle, a whisper to reeds caressed by wind. You chuckle words in your throat, meadowsweet, bladderwort, bulrush, withy. Here you meet land of apples, land of the dead. A portal to the wharf and mouth. Reams of split and gnarled wood look across levels that are not level. Even the sky sinks to touch your skin, low-lying as a misty grail. You Highland carrier, you sleepy soul, clothed by earth and sky and air, anointed by abbots and seers, pump and clyce and reen dug in your wake, bridges and mumps gaze upon you. Here you are,